Links Outdoors here with part 2 of my post-CDT gear review. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I have part 1, which goes over all the equipment that I used for the different seasons and snow safety and all that stuff in part 1. I'll put a link to that in the description. But this is a kind of a companion video that really shows like how I carried stuff, some tips about how I placed things in my pack that might be helpful to you, as well as how I set up and take down camp with the equipment that I have. So depending on which video you're interested in, feel free to either check out the rest of this one or go check out part 1. First things first, let's talk about how my setup was every day that I was walking. So I looked a lot like this. I use my trekking poles all the time except for road walks. So they would almost always be on my hands right here. These are the exact pair of shorts that I wore for the whole thing. They're pretty sun faded, but they're still in good shape. I used Ultra Lone Peak shoes and Dirty Girl running gaiters. These need to be replaced. They're very, very tired. My shirt is the Outdoor Research Echo Sun hoodie, and this thing was amazing. And like a giant dork, I'd wear my Garmin Fenix 7 solar watch on the outside of my shirt, so that way the solar panel on the screen could get a little bit of juice, as well as the fact that I could actually see it throughout the day. So this is kind of my generic go-to with how and where I wore things on my pack. So let me do a quick rundown for you. So this pocket right here is a Hilltop Packs waterproof pocket that I modified. This is where I'd keep my phone. It was really important to have this very accessible because on something like the Continental Divide Trail, you're using your phone for the navigation app all the time, sometimes multiple times in 15 minutes, depending on how rough or non-existent the trail is. I would use this mesh here as my trash. So as I would eat snacks throughout the day, the wrappers would go right in here. And that way, whenever I passed a real trash can, which wasn't that often, I could throw them right in. Or more importantly, I would still see them when I was done at camp at the end of the day and remember to put them into my trash bag and hang them in my bear bag. So that's what that was. This one here, I would keep sunglasses. And I would also keep a small thing of chapstick. I don't normally like chapstick, but having SPF protection for your sun, from the sun for your lips, really important on a trail that's as exposed as the CDT. And then also in here, I'd kept a small personal-sized thing of pepper spray, mainly for aggressive dogs and who knows, maybe an aggressive person. This hip belt pocket here is always my snacks. This pack can hold a ton of them, so I loaded this up just as an example with how much this thing can actually hold. There's even more in there, but I'll save you from having to watch all that. This pack, if I didn't say it already, is the Superior Wilderness Designs Ultra Long Haul 50 liter. And these hip belt pockets are also made by Superior Wilderness Designs. This left-hand side, I would keep a knife in here. I would keep a sweatband in case I wanted to put that on for big hills with heavy pack. And I'd keep a little thing of guy line and cord in there too. And that's about all that I would keep in that pocket. And then the side pockets, I've also found out a system that I really liked for that. So this pack actually does allow you to take water bottles in and out really pretty easily, which isn't the same for all packs on the market. Most of them claim to be able to do that, but this pack actually does it really well. So typically I would keep usually about 3 water bottles on me unless it was a really dry stretch. My main water bottle would go here. My second one would go on this side to try to balance out the weight. But I also found that these pockets are so big and accessible, I would use them for various things. So in the morning when I would wake up and it wasn't usually very sunny yet, I didn't like wearing a sun hat when I didn't have to, but I knew I was going to want one pretty quickly. So in this pocket, I would usually take my collapsible sun hat, which this is a Sunday afternoon adventure hat, and I would keep it in that right-hand pocket right there. And when it came time, when the sun finally was shining in my eyes or I could feel it cooking my neck, I could get to it and take it off. And then same deal, if it started to rain or something and I didn't want to be wearing this, it folds up nice and small. And these pockets are so big that I would just shove it way down to the bottom. So that worked out really well. I did something similar on this side for when I was in areas that had a lot of snow, where I would need the snow protection. So I would keep my whippet, which is it's made by Black Diamond. It screws into the top of a very specific pole and it gives you it's not an ice axe, but you can use it for self-arresting. And you can see my other videos if you're more curious about this, but that's where I kept it so it was always accessible. I saw numerous times where people were going through pretty dangerous steep snow slopes along the CDT and their ice axe was still strapped to the back of their pack. So you're carrying around this heavy, dangerous, pointy thing that's a safety tool, but if you don't take it out, it's not gonna help you. So this just worked really well because I could always just grab it. There's no reason not to, and it screws in so quickly. So that's where that lived. And then same deal. I would keep my micro spikes. Technically, these are Black Diamond Distance winter traction, but they're very similar to micro spikes, but these ones work great with trail runners. Check out my part 1 if you're more curious about this stuff. But so I'd keep those in these pockets too, so that way everything is really accessible. The last thing I want to talk about with my pack and setup and how I did things comes down to adding these 2 straps, or I guess they're more of like shock cord with cord locks. So I kept 2 of them on my left side. I'm right-handed. And so what I would use these for if I did get to a long road walk, even a dirt road walk, which there are a lot of on the CDT, I could take my poles, collapse them down to this. And I can collapse them down like so, and they'd both fit in there. And this gives me pretty good range of motion, so I can go hands-free with the poles, but still have them accessible there if I want to take them out and use them once I get back off of a road or something. So that was really kind of convenient. And then the other thing that worked really well for me is you'll notice I have this umbrella in a DCF stuff sack. And so what I would do with that is I would keep it just how it is right there. But I found out a system that if it started to rain or if I was in really, really baking sun, I can take this thing out by lifting up on the bottom, removing this, pulling down. This would blow away if you don't put it somewhere safe, so I'd usually just tuck it right into this pocket. And now I have access to my umbrella. And so these same straps here, if I move one of them up above my sternum strap, there we go. Rusty, I haven't done that in a while. But this let me go hands-free. I could still use my trekking poles. As you can probably see with the current sun going down, this actually keeps it out of my face pretty well. And this was amazing for the rain too. One thing that I didn't think about until I started actually using it for this is, again, using the far out navigation guide or even just your cell phone as a camera. When the water gets on the screen, it loses its ability to use the touch screen correctly, and you're constantly trying to wipe off the water, and it's smudging and it's not responsive, and it's really frustrating. So trying to use the Far Out app all the time to figure out where I was when it was raining, the screen wouldn't work. However, keeping this the way that it is, my smartphone would be in here protected by the umbrella, and I could take it out and check it and do stuff on it, and this would block the rain from getting on the phone and the screen. So that was a huge blessing, and that worked out really well. So the other thing that's really nice about this too is that I can take the umbrella off, and these pockets are so huge that what I would do is I would take this and get it all the way into the back and press my water bottle up against it. And it's not super secure, but that's secure enough that if it was kind of showers on and off, I could get it back out and also just leave it here, and it never fell off or blew away or anything. So I could kind of stow and go at the same time with that. So that's kind of a lot of my setup, but hopefully that gives you some ideas of what worked for me, and maybe it'll inspire you to try something that might work better for you. This next part, I want to show you sort of the order that I would typically do things when I got to camp, as well as how I would set things up. So first things first, water is always something that I consider about where I'm going to camp. A lot of places along the CDT don't have water, and in certain places, when the water sources are artificial, like cow tanks and things, the wildlife is very dependent on drinking out of those, so you're not supposed to, and you shouldn't, sleep right next to them because you're preventing other things in nature from going to the water. So anyway, what I would oftentimes do is try to pick a water source that I thought might be my last one for the day. And if I needed to, I'd take out my Canuck 3-liter bladder, fill it up, and I would strap it to the top of my pack, and I would carry water to camp because I like to have a lot of water at camp. So I would do that. Otherwise, once I got to camp, I would find a spot that looks nice, obviously. The first thing I do, and this is a tip for you, is the way that you take off your pack can really help make it so it goes on correctly the next time. So if you don't ever adjust the buckles on your pack, it's going to never fit on you quite as good as it did the first time that you adjusted them, because your body shape changes. Especially right now, I've got more going on in my belly than I did when I finished the trail. And as well as how you pack and stuff too. So anyway, what I always do when I take off my pack is I give it a little bit of slack in the load lifters, a little bit of slack in the shoulders, a little slack in the sternum strap, and then lastly, quite a bit of slack in the waist. And so I completely loosen everything up. It's falling off me right now. But the point of that is when I go to put this back on, everything's loose and I can cinch it in the correct order, and it really increases the fit on your body. And I'll show you how to do that when I'm packing things up. So the first thing I would do is typically take out my bladder and my filter. Drop the toothbrush. And so, like I said, I would either fill this up and have it strapped up here if I knew there wasn't going to be water. But if there was water, I would fill it up first thing at camp, because I use this as a gravity filter and it filters water while I'm doing other stuff. So I would always start doing this first. But always keep little things in a pocket, otherwise you're going to lose them. So let's pretend that tree over there by my dog is a branch or something. I would go hang this up first. And while I'm setting up camp, I'd have to keep an eye on that thing, because it fills an empty bottle up, even though it's not really going right now for real, about every 3 minutes, depending on how murky the water is. So I'd have to go kind of like pay attention to that and change it out multiple times as I'm setting up camp. But anyway, I would usually start by getting my shelter set up. So I kept my stakes right here, so I always knew where they were. I'd loosen the draw cord and keep them in this pocket so I have them available. I have a ground sheet in there, but to save time, I'm not going to bother messing with it. This isn't a video showing you how to set this tent up. I do have a video of the 3,000 mile review of the Durston X-Mid Pro 1. If you want to check it out, I'll leave a link in the description below for you to check that one out. Same deal, always put this stuff in a pocket. So I'm going to set this up, and I'll fast forward it so you don't have to watch the whole thing. Like I said, I have other videos in setting this up. So that's why I keep the pack, the tent in the top of the pack, is so I can set this up first. If it was raining, everything else was able to stay inside my waterproof and taped backpack, so it should stay pretty dry, hopefully. And then I can get this set up and put everything in there next, in case it is wet. So the next thing I would typically do is start organizing things out in the places that I wanted them for the evening, just for efficiency's sake. My toiletry kit, I wouldn't usually need this in the evening, so I would put it out of the way in the back here. That way I knew where it was in case I needed it. Same thing with the rain jacket. Having this on the outside so I could find it in the middle of the night if I needed it is really helpful. Ground sheet I would put underneath, but we're gonna skip that. My ditty bag, I always kept a couple things in here that I wanted out. So the first thing is I'd usually take out my phone charger, which is the battery bank and cables. I also kept my flashlight in here and my earplugs. And I would put those all into this pocket that I'll show you in a second by my head. So I'd keep this up by my head in the tent. I would keep my dinner stuff separate because I'm gonna need that in a little bit. And that's everything that I kept in there that's above my pack liner. I would take out my jacket. If it was chilly or the sun was going down, I could, of course, throw this on. My mat, my clothes bag. I have sleep clothes in here that you can check out in part 1. So a bunch of Alpha Direct, like sleep socks and pants, and like a Senchi Ren sweater. So this would usually go down by my feet in case I needed something in the middle of the night. And lastly, my sleeping bag, and this also has my pillow in it too. So now that the pack liner is empty, that's also my pad inflator. So I would take this off, put it in my pocket so I don't lose it. And then I would use the tent, as long as it wasn't raining, to help me blow this up without getting an increased chance of getting holes in it. I didn't have to patch this once the entire trip, so this system worked well enough. So I drape it over like so. Make sure that my wing valve is closed and the screw nozzle is open. All right, so now this is all inflated. This should go in first. And then I like to get my sleeping bag out and let it get some loft or some air drying. So this is my Timber-made, basically it's like a hood, a balaclava. So this can pair with my winter jacket or my sleeping bag. So typically I would keep this up by my head in case it got really cold. This is my pillow setup. I'll show you that in a second. And this is my Timber-made Serpentis 20-degree false bottom sleeping bag. Again, if you're more interested in any of the specifics, check out part 1. So the next thing I would do is I would take this waterproof stuff sack, and I'd always make sure to have my orange pad cord and my tent stuff sack, as well as my stake bag. I'd put all those in there, and I'd roll this up, and I would keep this in the opposite side mesh pocket on the side. Again, I'll show you all this once it's set up. So this is the guts of the Nemo Philo Elite, which has a removable pillowcase, and I just brought the inflatable part. I would use my buff with an Enlightened Equipment quilt pad strap. Put it on like so. And then I would take my... And that is an A+ glamping pillow right there. Soft, warm, squishy, and thick. Plus the pad strap helps it from moving on you throughout the night. Once this is empty, I'd always put it back in my pack so I didn't lose it or have it blow away. And just about everything else would kind of stay where it is. So I'd keep my water bottle in these pockets. They help the pack stay upright. I'd always make sure that I emptied my trash out and any snacks that I had in my bags here. But then I would take my whole pack kind of how it is and tuck it into the vestibule over here on the side, leaning it up against this trekking pole. And a benefit of that is, like I was saying before, the InReach Mini hangs out right here by the door. So I can still be inside my tent and zip up the mesh and have good access to it. I would usually message my wife back and forth a few times or for a while in the evenings. So with that being right there and living on my pack, it was really easy for me to turn it off at the end of the night rather than having to open a stuff sack and dig around to try to find it or something. So that worked out really well. There's water that's right here. So if I woke up and I was thirsty, it was always kind of tucked in my pack right like that. This particular pack has a sleeve on the back panel that's designed to fit a bit of thin light foam. So I would take this out and I would fold this in half, and then this would become my camp seat for when I do my cooking. Then after I eat and everything and I'm done filtering my water for the night, I would go hang my food somewhere, ideally, or if I'm above tree line or something, I would put it on the other side of the vestibule. Let me give you a tour now that I have things set up as close to how they would normally be as possible. So there's my cook kit, my pot, and my stove and fuel and everything are in the food bag. This is the back panel of my pack that makes a great sit pad. This is my vestibule. So I would usually keep my socks and gaiters on my hip belt, like just to keep it off of the ground. Good access to water in my InReach Mini. And inside here, up by my head, I would typically keep my ditty bag with my batteries and chargers and things like that. This is the pocket that I would always put my headlamp and my earplugs in, even though I didn't always sleep with earplugs. That's where I'd put them in case I woke up and needed them. And then the hood I would keep up there just in case I was really cold and woke up and had to put that on, which wasn't that often. Looking down at this end, that's the other pocket, and I would put all of those stuff sacks in there the same every time. So that way when I woke up, even if it was still dark, I knew exactly where they were and could pack up everything inside the tent and put those empty stuff sacks back in my pockets for when it was time to break down the other things. And I would typically keep my clothing bag down at the bottom just to help prevent the pad from sliding all the way up against the end slightly, and also just because there's extra room down there. All right, so let me show you how I'd actually get into bed and set everything up for sleep. And then also I'll show you how I pack things up in the morning too, because I had a system that worked well for me for that. So the beauty of having this thin light foam pad is it's a little bit of extra insulation. It's a little bit of puncture resistance for the air mat. And then also what it helped the most with was acting as like a sticky layer between the slippery tent floor and the slippery nylon sleeping pad. So it actually acted as like glue and didn't allow them to slide very much on each other. So I'd always tuck this underneath, like so, under the torso. And that actually does a really good job of helping prevent it sliding around. So at this point, when I'm done for the night, I would have brushed my teeth, hung my food bag, all that kind of stuff. Some here that worked pretty well for me too. So I would take the gaiters off. These were usually disgusting and muddy. And I would usually rest these on the far side hip belt pad, keeping them off the ground. The socks were usually disgusting too, so I would typically not leave these on. I would usually drape them like that, just to keep them out of my tent because they were usually pretty disgusting. And again, off the ground there, so they could try to dry out a tiny bit. So that's where those would go. I would keep my shoes typically right here by the front of the door, especially if I had to get up in the middle of the night because nature was calling. That way I could always find them. And if there was a chance of rain or something, I could tuck them underneath that part of the vestibule, but I usually woke up if that happened. So at this point, I would be all ready for sleep. I would always try to sleep with the vestibule sides both open when I could, just for a good cross breeze. But yeah, use your imagination, fast forward, and let's pretend that the sun itself is actually coming up and it's the morning. So while I'm lying down, I'd use my body weight as an advantage. I would reach over to where the valve is on my pillow and let my skull press the air out of that. Same deal, I'd reach up over my shoulder and open up the valve. All right, so at this point, I've let all the air out of those two things. The next thing I do is I reach back and I'd always go to my go-to stuff sack, knowing where it is, and I would get things out that I would need to pack up. So I would take this stuff and put it in my pockets. At this point, if it's really chilly, I can take my jacket out of my pillow and put it on, because doing all this packing up is actually going to generate some body heat. And the morning is usually the coldest part of the day. So that's another tip for you, is get layers on before you get out of the tent, so that way your body warms them up. But the first thing I would typically do is stuff my sleeping bag. My pillow and my hood all go in here as well. And then I'd set this aside somewhere inside so I'm not putting it on the ground outside and getting it wet or dirty. Next things I would do is pack up the things that are in this pocket. So my flashlight would go back into my ditty bag. So I pack all this up, same thing. Once this is completely closed up, I put it up by the head, out of the way. Same thing, closed bag, get everything organized. So the next thing comes to doing the mat. And so there's another really big bonus about having this mat in here, is that I can fold this and use it as a sit pad inside, so that way I'm not sitting directly on the cold floor, which might not sound like it makes much of a difference, but if it's really cold out, this is so much more comfortable. So I keep this cord handy here. And there we go, everything inside is all packed up. So I'm sitting on my nice comfy sit pad here while I put my shoes on. So I would take my gaiters, put those on first, put my gross socks back on, or maybe change to a fresh pair. That would be my clothing bag inside if I had them. And here's another bonus of the sit pad, is that if the ground is kind of muddy or gross, you can open this up and put it outside And now you have a way to keep all of your things off the ground. So at this point, I would just pack everything back up into my pack. Let me show you how I put everything into my pack. So first things first on the outside, this right hip belt pocket I use for all my snacks for the day. I load that up in the morning when I'm leaving camp, and those are really easy to access. In this shoulder pocket here, I always keep my sunglasses handy and a thing of chapstick. And for most of the trail, I kept a small personal sized pepper spray in there, mainly for aggressive dogs or aggressive people. I swapped that out once I got to Wyoming when I started carrying real bear spray rather, so I didn't need both. This shoulder strap here is where I put my phone. So this huge magnetic closure right here fits my enormous Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, which I'm currently filming on. And I put in some magnets here, so it kind of flips closed, and it's a waterproof material. So that's a modified Hilltop Packs pouch. So in my left front pocket here, I always kept the same things. This is a little stuffed sack full of cord and guy lines. I'd use that for clotheslines or for guying out my tent. I also kept this ultralight knife in there too. So this thing is about 1 ounce, including the sheath. And I used this little piece of cord to tie it to the pack so I couldn't lose it. And also for just that super unlikely chance that I ever needed to get this out really quickly, I could just pull on this like that and this would stay attached to the pack. So in hindsight, I probably wouldn't bother with this again, but it made me feel a little bit better just because there's so many predators and stuff in the area. So that lived in there like so. Moving along to the back side, I added this mesh pouch here, and this is where I'd keep all my wet things. So my toothbrush, my Canuck water bladder, Sawyer squeeze filter, and then also I have sleep apnea, so I have to wear a mouth guard, kind of like a retainer, so that would go in there, and then these are for cleaning that. And the reason I did this was to keep all those things out in the sun so they'd dry faster, and also so they wouldn't get stuff inside the pack wet. So that lived like that. The main mesh panel, I wouldn't keep a lot in there, but I would keep things in there if I knew that I might want them throughout the day. So like a raincoat or a hat or something. I always kept my stakes here on the outside. Consumables like bug spray or sunscreen so I could get them quickly or apply them when I stopped for breaks. My Garmin InReach Mini I always put on this clip right here. And there is a reason for that. I'll show you why I put it there when I show you how I set up my tent later on. And that's about it for the outside. So then going on to the main body, umbrella. So the way that I always stored this is I would take the umbrella in this DCF sack here, and that's really to protect it from UV and to help reduce the chances of it getting all cut up from bushwhacking. But I would take this and stick it way down in the back left pocket. Cinch it up there. And then for water bottles, I would usually keep one big one on each side to balance out the weight. And then if I needed to have a whole bunch more, these pockets can fit too. So it would look a lot like that. So the way that I did the main body inside starts with this really crinkly Nalafune pack liner. And I made it into a custom pad inflator. So I'd always start by taking this out and then doing my sleeping bag in its waterproof stuff sack first. Take this whole thing and this would go all the way down. So the next thing I would do, there we go, see? The next thing I would take is my clothes bag, which is this, and I would put this up against my back. And then the way that I took my sleeping mat was I don't bother with the stuff sack for it, I just use that little piece of cord. And this goes flat with the clothes bag, but not on my back. Hopefully you can see that, that's what it looks like. And so because all those things are round, you can definitely get them to pack down smaller if you pack everything loose, but I like the organization and the extra level of water resistance of all those things. So what I would do next is take my puffy jacket, whether it was this really heavy duty winter one or my Enlightened Equipment Torrid, and I would use this to kind of stuff into all the nooks and crannies. So there we go. And that's everything I would keep in the dry bag. So after this, I push out quite a bit of air, and then I do a few twists of the pack liner, and then just tuck it down the side. So a few twists, and tuck it down the side, and there we go. So that's everything I really prioritize keeping dry. So you can see there's still a ton of room in there. Next up, I'd usually do my food bag. When it's really full, I would have to put it in standing up, but this is to mimic like 1 or 2 days worth of food. So when I have it this low, I can put it in sideways. Like so. Next up, I would usually take my pot. I usually tried to put this inside my pack when I could, just one less thing rattling around on the outside. And when I could, I'd usually nestle it down with the food bag, something like that. Next up would be my shelter. So in this case, this is a DCF ground sheet. My tent itself. You can see there's still a ton of room in there in case I had a lot more food than that. And then I would keep things handy up towards the top that I might want access to throughout the day. So in this case, this is my toiletry kit with a roll of TP and a trowel and some hand sanitizer. My raincoat, if I was expecting rain in the morning, I'd put this in the mesh panel outside. If not, I would usually have it towards the top just in case. And then this is my ditty bag that has my first aid kit, my repair kit, my little mini pocket knife, wallet for all that cash and credit card stuff, and all those little miscellaneous things, including batteries and chargers. So this would go up towards the top as well. And if I knew I was going to be going into town, sometimes I'd put that out here in the mesh pocket so I could plug it in real fast and charge it while I was in town. And that's basically everything. This is my little Garmin temp. This syncs with this fancy Garmin Fenix 7 watch, and I can see what temperature it got down to through the night, so that usually lived there. Oh, and then last thing too, I would always keep a sweatband. This is just a UV buff one. I would always keep that into this pocket here too. And there you go. That's how I packed everything into my pack. And as I woke up, first thing that I did was put the tent stuff sack in this pocket, part of my system, so I knew exactly where it would be for this next part. That's all packed up. So you do not want to forget your water bladder. All right, at this point I'm all packed up and ready, so I just have to put my pack on. I want to show you how I put my pack on. All of my pads, or all my straps rather, are already pre-loosened from the last time that I took it off. So I'll take some time to get my clothing and everything fixed and comfortable. First thing I do is the hip belt, and getting these on your body where you find them to be most comfortable is important. And I'll tighten them down quite a bit. So that leaves the rest of the pack really loose. The next step is to not over tighten the shoulder straps, but pull straight down on these buckles. These should end up right in your underarm. The load lifters come next. They shouldn't be tight, but you want them to be taut and make a nice little triangle there. And hopefully you don't have much of a gap between your back and the pack. And the last thing is always the sternum strap. And this one does not need to be that tight. It's just to help keep the shoulder straps from trying to slide off your shoulders. But if you over tighten that, it can affect your breathing and be uncomfortable, especially if you're a woman and you have a bust. So you don't need to over tighten this one. But this is how I put my pack back on. My trekking poles are already back at the lengths that I like them from when I was taking down my tent. So that saves me a step too. And I'm ready to start walking. So I hope that this video was helpful. I hope maybe you came up with a couple ideas from how I do things that might work for you. I'd really recommend that you take some time and try to think a little bit about a system of what you can do if you're trying to be more efficient, to pack up more quickly, or if you just want to be more organized so you know where things are. I find that it really is something I enjoy doing, is to try to continuously improve my camp setup and how I do things. So let me know in the comments if there was anything you found particularly helpful, or if you have any ideas about how I do things that I could improve upon. I would love to hear it, because anything I can do to make my setup and breakdown a little bit more efficient is something I'd like to know. I'd really appreciate it if you'd considered subscribing. If enough people subscribe to my channel, my wife might not make me get a real job, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.